Where do you evacuate to during natural disasters? Curious foreigner here, just wondering where you all actually go when you have to evacuate. I'm guessing a mix of hotels, family, sleeping in cars, etc. Any stories, etc. appreciated? Shelters? Out of affected area? Really depends. Oh, there are shelters? That makes sense. I'm totally ignorant on this, but we see in the news thousands of people being told to evacuate, and I was just wondering where they all go. Out of the affected area, I obviously figured was the case. LOL, schools and libraries often become shelters. Sometimes churches and even stadiums, too. And you might also be surprised to learn people rarely have to evacuate very far. For example, for Hurricane Milton, residents only had to go a few miles, mostly away from the immediate coast and riverbanks, or other areas prone to floods. Yeah, I am surprised actually. I was thinking people were traveling really far to get out of the way. And you know, thousands of people doing that. Often those shelters are just public buildings with large open spaces, not buildings built specifically as a shelter. For example, a local high school may be designated as a shelter, and there will be aid workers there with supplies. It'll be buildings large enough to hold several thousand people. During the most recent hurricane, Florida set up enough shelters across the state to hold 200,000 people. Part of the reason that such public buildings are so expensive to build or maintain, is because they're designed to act as emergency shelters. Both my middle school and high school got hit by tornadoes and only lost some roof tiles and some windows. All we have on Alabama are tornadoes, so we're not really traveling more than 15 minutes away from home, if at all. I guess if there was a wildfire, but I have never heard of one that required evacuation. Only heard of one in my corner of Alabama in my lifetime anyway. For tornadoes, it's the lowest floor of your house, a space near the center of the home with no windows and a closing door. That's where you keep your emergency supplies. Or if you live in a tiny apartment like me, you keep them in the closet directly beside the bathroom in a basket you can grab on the way in. You turn on James Spann's FB Live and grab your helmet and pray. Why, what do you /hoochie_scrazy_? You honestly think there aren't shelters? Seriously? God, foreigners can't help but assume we don't know what we're doing just because they're ignorant of how we do things. Did I assume anything, or did I come and ask? I don't see shelters on your list of guesses. Does that mean I presumed there aren't shelters, or just that I didn't think of it? If you didn't think of the obvious, that's on you. Why so defensive? First day here? Will you have to prove you're from the affected area somehow to get into a shelter, or will they just admit you regardless as they would a homeless person? Depends on a lot of circumstances, but generally speaking, the evacuation order implies an effort to clear the public population from publicly accessible spaces, which includes roadways. I.e., it's just as much of a safety calculus on behalf of emergency workers anticipated to be tasked with restoration and recovery. Individuals who refuse to evacuate are socially culpable, and sometimes also legally culpable, for actively endangering emergency responders and utility repair crews. Following that same logic, passers-by in need of shelter in a relevant evacuation zone, I would surmise, would generally be allowed to join those already sheltered. Can't really speak on much since I'm a Midwesterner. The worst we'll get is a tornado in the area, but it's typically not something you evacuate for unless it's big and right by you. And usually then, evacuating is essentially just getting TF out of the area for the day, the bathtub in the middle, if the house when the tornado comes. That's the extent of our disasters. Maybe an ice storm in the winter, then there's nowhere to go. Buckle up and hang on.